All right, guys, welcome in. We're so excited to start the second episode of the parenting puzzle with Dr. Daniela Owen. So last time we talked about how we wanted to hear from the audience, that we thought it was really important on this podcast to give parents and to give families tools to provide some resources for the things that were most challenging to them. So after the last podcast, which if you didn't check it out, go check it out on YouTube and Spotify and Apple Podcasts and everywhere you can find podcasts. We put a poll out there on Speedster Squad, and the overwhelming response to that poll was one of the biggest challenges that parents are facing right now is when they're dealing with a co-parenting situation or a blended home. What are some tools? What are some resources that are out there as they're dealing with some of these really challenging situations? So we've got a great podcast for you today. We've got Sarah, who's my wife. This situation really hits home for me because currently, right now, I'm dealing with a blended family situation. So who better to ask about it than published author, renowned child psychologist, one of the best in the field that has all these resources backed by science. So Dr. D, how you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks for asking. How are you guys both?
Doing fabulous. Look, for me, I'm super excited to address this issue because not only it affects me and Sarah personally dealing with our son who's 8. I think it also impacts a lot of families across America. So what I'm thinking is this is so short, easy resources that could be implemented to hopefully make things a little bit easier. Dealing with a co-parenting situation or dealing with a child that's really struggling with the back and forth or struggling with anxiety related to co-parenting. Um, so I'll start it off with a question for you, Dr. D. Um, in your field, so if you have a child that is, let's just say, anxious about where he's going to be that day, or maybe more anxious to go to another house um, than maybe they're more anxious to go to the biological mother's home than the biological father's home, or just really anxious in general about the back and forth, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Specifically talking about how to deal with that and I think we'll talk more about the parents later, but just from the child's perspective that might be feeling anxious about that back and forth. What's your thoughts or tools on that?
Well, it's completely understandable for kids to be anxious. That's a lot of transitions in addition to all the transitions that kids have to do on a regular basis to and from school. There might be other activities involved, right? And transitions for most humans are tricky. At the low end, a little inconvenient. At the high end, very anxiety provoking. So the first and most important thing to do is to just label and validate whatever your child is feeling. So if they're feeling anxious, I get it. It's a lot. And I understand that. We are so lucky to have this blended family where you have all these parents who love you and you got more houses than some kids. And I get it. That's a lot. So just validate that emotional experience. If your kid is not anxious, if they're excited about going to their other parent, regardless of how you feel about the other parent, you want to validate that. I can see a smile on your face. You're going to mom's house today. That's so wonderful. I'm delighted to see it. You want them to feel heard, understood, and you want to let them know that whatever they are feeling, their feelings are completely valid. So, if they're just feeling a little bit anxious or nervous, doing some things to help them calm their body down, taking some slow, deep breaths, listening to a song that they find relaxing or calming for their system, having slow sips of cool water, which also just kind of slows them down a little bit. All of those kinds of things can help settle their system. If they're feeling highly anxious, you might check in and say, is there something going on that's making you feel this way? And then you're getting into problem solving zone of trying to figure out if there's something going on that can help you solve the problem. But if it's just that it's harder or I like it better here with you, again, you want to go back to validation. Yeah, I get it. I get it that it's hard. I hear you that you like it here at our house, and you're so lucky to have, in your case, a mother who loves you and wants to be with you. And so I hear you. And today's the day to go to moms, right? So
Yeah,
you're validating, you're understanding, you're acknowledging all of it, and you're also encouraging that transition. Because sometimes kids are looking, they're worried about parents actually, and in blended families, sometimes when kids are transitioning, they're worried about how their parent is feeling. And it's really important to give them the cue that you're okay. You're okay, that you're here for them, that they don't need to be here for you.
that's interesting. So you think part of the anxiety could be the fact that they want to make sure mom or dad's okay?
It could be. It could be. So you
Yeah,
certainly don't want to be adding to it if that's the case, right?
yeah. I mean that makes sense. And I know broad questions is something I'm guilty of a lot, but so we're touching on blended families, and I know Sarah has some questions she wants to ask, so we'll get to her in just a second. But I want to just give you the floor. Is there anything kind of top of mind for you when you're thinking about blended families, co-parent situations that are maybe going great or not going as great? Is there something top of mind for you, a tip or trick um, that you've implemented with some of your clients?
The very most important thing for parents who are co-parenting from different households to think about is that the kids should never, ever be the messenger. And I know this might sound silly, even for very mundane things like, oh, mom's bringing my soccer cleats to the game later. Kids should never, ever be the messenger. It's a slippery slope. It puts pressure on them. It causes them to have to remember something. Jake, you were saying that it can be hard to go from household to household. It's a lot for kids to think about and remember and handle. We never want to give them anything else, right? And so they should never, ever be the messenger, regardless of how friendly or acrimonious the parents are with each other. You got to find a way to communicate to each other without using your child as the in between. And again, it might seem super harmless with a very, very neutral message. Don't put that on your child. Communicate that between the two of you. That is the number one most helpful thing when you are a blended family to keep in mind.
I love that too, because I think in a lot of circumstances, it probably can be really easy, especially if it's maybe it's a little volatile, right, between the co parents. It could be easy to say, hey, tell your mom this, because the parent is then just trying to avoid having to interact, right? So I think that it's simple, but really useful advice. Do not make your kid the messenger about anything, right? So, Sarah, you out there?
I'm here.
Okay.
Hi.
We're introducing Dr. D. Let me know if you don't like this. Our Speedster Squad hotline.
I love it.
I like that.
So, Sarah, you get the privilege of being the first person on the Speedster Squad hotline today. Um,
Thank you, Sarah.
we're very happy to have you. Welcome to the Parenting Puzzle Podcast with Dr. Daniela Owen. How are you
And
doing?
I am doing really well today. And thank you, Dr. Daniela, for doing this with me and Jake.
Thank you for being a part of it and bringing your questions and wisdom.
Um, so my question as a stepmom, would be one of my biggest struggles is knowing my boundaries. I feel like Jake and I did a lot of prep work, a lot of counseling, a lot of reading, really before we um, entered marriage, really. And I learned a lot about parenting, but being in it, like actually being in the day to day and the mundane, is a little different. It's a lot different than preparing when you're like in the heat of the moment, I guess. So my question relates to, I guess, maybe discipline or how to handle when your stepchild is maybe being disrespectful to you or lashing out on you as an easier target when he's feeling sad and angry or he's in his big feelings and just really being maybe um just disrespectful. I'll stick to that word
Yeah.
towards a parent figure um who I'm with him a lot alone. I work in a school system, so I'm with him in the summer. I'm with alone. What I mean by alone is just when Jake is at work.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of times when I need to discipline, and it's not working because there are, there's boundaries there. It's the things that I'm choosing to discipline him with is just not working, like taking away screens or timeout or things like that. So more specifically, um, what can I do as a step parent to just maybe have some common ground of um you do need to be respectful. You can't talk to me with just with disrespect, and you do need to listen to me. But also maybe considering that he is angry and sad about just the back and forth and his parents not being together um and I'm not his real mom, you know. So that's all of that.
That is a great question. Let me just get one point of clarification first, Sarah, if you don't mind. When you say taking away screens or having a timeout isn't working, can you tell me more specifically what does happen when you try to use those different points of discipline?
When I say, okay, no screens for the rest of the night, or no screens tomorrow morning when you wake up, um, lately he's just been saying, okay. And it's just back to the same pattern. So that's not really making much of an impact. It might be, and he might be fronting, he might
Yeah.
be um, putting on a show for me to, make a point like you don't have an effect,
Hmm.
Um, but that's what's been happening lately. I'll just say, okay. So,
Got it.
but it is right back to disrespect.
Yeah. Got it. Got it. Okay. So it sounds like you're not doing this, but one thing I just want to encourage you to not do, and encourage parents out there to not do is if you label a consequence that like the loss of a screen or taking a break and you just it kind of falls flat, it's just like okay, and then they're back to being disrespectful. I don't care, whatever, that kind of thing. Parents can sometimes be tempted to layer on more and more consequences, but once you get into that zone, that's usually not going to be effective, and it can actually kind of create more hostility or kind of like put you in the parenting hot seat, if that makes sense, because you're now reaching for types of discipline or consequences that you think are going to actually have an effect. And your kid ends up in the situation where they're kind of running the show by saying, I don't care, right? So I just want to warn about that. Watch out. If you say there's going to be a consequence, do it. You've lost screens for the rest of the night. You must take away those screens for the rest of the night. So only label a consequence that you are willing and able to do. If you know you need them to be on a screen while you're making dinner, please don't say you've lost screens. Please tell them to go take a break in their room or in a different spot in the house and use that kind of timeout concept instead. Again, I'm not saying that you're doing that. I just wanted to label that because that is a place where parents do end up getting into a power struggle with kids, which isn't going to work. And in a blended family, to your point, one of the things that you're really trying to do is preserve and grow the relationship, right? Because you aren't a biological parent, so you don't get that natural, I'm your mother or father from birth. And so Absolutely. You want to be mindful of that. And parents who are the step parent do want to be careful about preserving that relationship because that's where you also are going to get some of your parenting mojo, right? Like the more your child feels connected to you, the more your stepchild feels connected to you, the more likely they are to listen and be respectful, right? So I would do a few things. I would, going back to what we were saying at the beginning, validate any feelings. So if you can just tell that he's in a mood, start there. Looks like maybe you're having some big feelings right now. What would you say is going on? Some kids will bite, some kids won't. Don't force him if he's not going there with you. But if he's like, yeah, I'm mad. Oh, okay, I can hear that you're mad. What happened today that made you feel mad? Right? That might be a totally different interaction that you go down with him. And then that can actually bring you together rather than apart, right? And that's the goal, right? Is that point of connection. So if he's saying, yeah, this thing happened at school and I'm feeling really frustrated. Oh, I get it. Can you tell me about it? I'd love to listen, right? These are sending signals that you're here, you're available, you're understanding, you want that bond, you want that connection. And sometimes when kids have a step parent, they're kind of testing. They don't know. It's again, it's not a guarantee for them. And so they're trying to figure out, are you really there? What's the role here, right? So the more you're available, listening, engaging, trying to go there with them, not afraid of their big emotions. I'm here with you. I can handle this. You're upset. I'm here for it. Those are sending really important signals, and your stepchild isn't losing those, right? So if you offer a consequence and they kind of shut it down, stick with it because you got to keep your parent, you don't want to lose your parenting authority, right? That's really important. Of course, make sure that that's something that you and your marital partner, who's the child's biological parent, agree on. So you can always take these little moments to remind you, hey, let's do a touch base about what I've been using lately for discipline. Is that the same thing you're doing? Is this working? And so sometimes more conversations need to happen. Although I would argue, whether intact or blended, it's always great to have these conversations with any co-parent. But being able to make sure that you're on the same page is a big deal. Uh, but really getting back to validating feelings, maintaining a sense of connection, and also maintaining your authority in a calm and collected way so that if the goal is to kind of rile you up, your feathers are not getting ruffled, right? And that's also sending a message. I'm cool, I'm calm, I'm here. I'm here for you. I'm here for us as a family. And those are important kind of reading between the line messages that you could be sending that might actually help improve the relationship and also increase the respect that you're asking for.
That is so good. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I want to say one more note on respect, and I have a little YouTube video on this, which is parents deserve respect. Step parents, biological parents, any parenting figure deserves respect from a child. You feel good and your child feels good. Kids don't feel good when they're being disrespectful. No one feels good when we're being disrespectful. And so if your kid says something to you in a way that's disrespectful, very calmly, you might take a deep breath and say, try that again with a different tone, please. And if they try it again and it comes out a little sassy, can you try that again with a neutral tone, or can you try that again in a more respectful way, please? And they do, and then you say thank you, right? So you're just really reinforcing and encouraging. You're not getting angry about it, but you're also setting that limit because again, there might be some limit set pushing, and so you want to acknowledge that and be aware of it, and you deserve respect. And if you're the one there and you're the one parenting in that moment and you're the one doing the disciplining, you deserve to be respected, and you'll both feel good because of it.
That's an interesting point about nobody feels good being disrespectful. You know, for
Yeah.
me as the adult or the parent, yeah, when you're disrespecting somebody, you don't feel good after, right? And
Yeah.
it's just think about that a kid has that same mindset. Like they don't feel good about it either, right? So offering them an example to like, oh, cut, take two, right? I think that for us, Sarah and I, that's something that we could possibly implement, like to give him a second chance. Like, hey, that came off a little tooty, right? Let's take to that. Let's try it again with a better tone. And that's even prior to getting to that place where the situation that was calm gets more, let's say, erupting, and a consequence comes, right? We're giving them a chance to rephrase, retone before we get to the place where they're losing screens or they're losing X, Y, and Z. So that's really interesting. Can I just go back really quick? A clarification point. You were talking about almost like stacking consequences
Mhm.
or stacking, I guess consequence is a good word.
Yeah.
So like you give a consequence of, and I understood the point about if you give screens, follow through with the screens. One of the worst things you could do in a discipline situation would be not. But for like Sarah as a stepmom, she gives a consequence of screens. Were you talking about like if she would then again because of the kids' indifference, right? You're talking about maybe stacking another consequence on top of that because of the indifference.
Exactly. So you say, okay, you've lost your screens for the rest of the night. And then they're like, whatever. And you're responding to disrespect and you're like, that's disrespectful. And they're like, I don't care. And you say, fine, you've lost it for tomorrow too. Whatever, I don't care. None of this matters to me. Okay, now you've lost it for the week. You can, as a parent, easily kind of get pulled into wanting to offering these negative consequences in response to the problem behavior. Doesn't work well. When kids are in that heightened state of arousal, they're really upset, distressed, angry, frustrated, whatever their emotion, they're not responding. It's not landing. So have the one and follow through with it. So it's very clear that if you do this thing, this is what's going to happen and it's going to happen. So the goal of a negative consequence is to change their behavior next time. Right. So if they've already been disrespectful and you take away screens, you're not trying to get them to not have been disrespectful. You're trying to get them next time they're being disrespectful to remember that and say, oh, I don't want to lose screens. I'm going to change my tone. Right. And so the goal is to change the behavior next time, stacking up those consequences, extending how long you're going to do the consequence doesn't work for anyone. They are likely not going to respond in the moment, and you are likely going to have a harder time implementing that consequence, which means you're not going to really do it.
Yep.
Right. Or you might escalate, okay, you've lost, you've lost the privilege to go to your friend's birthday party. Now you've lost Thanksgiving. Like you're hosting Thanksgiving. The kids coming to Thanksgiving. So watch out because when we get upset as parents, we can sometimes up the ante into a space that we're not actually going to do. And now we're just making false threats, which is really unhelpful. So promise a consequence that you are willing and able to follow through with it. But if it's not getting the immediate change in behavior you want, either you remove yourself, and that's kind of like what we sometimes call a parent timeout, or you can have your child say, hey, you need a break right now. Go take a break. The goal is to get everyone's heat to come down.
Yeah.
And to your point, if you can prevent all of this by having a second chance to rephrase something in a more respectful way, then you can even avoid this kind of interaction in the first place in certain circumstances, which is ideal for all of us, right? Because it's much faster and easier.
What do we talk about in the first one? Parenting is hard. Full stop. And that's what you said,
Yeah.
right? I love the take two thing because that's one of those things where it's like, okay, this is one of those small little tricks that can make it just a little less hard. Nothing's perfect, and it's always going to be a challenge, but let's take to this and try it again and see what happens. Um, Sarah, I appreciate it. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you, Sarah.
coming on. I think I could confidently say you're the hottest person to ever get on the Speedster Squad hot, at least in my opinion. You know, I
The
don't see
first,
that
but you're gonna hold the title as his wife, so we
never.
started with a bang.
Just to wrap it up, I know we said we'd be a little bit shorter, but we're all a little talkative here. And I think it's, Dr. D, I think it's such an important topic that it warrants a little bit more time because it's such a hard thing. People that are co-parented, that are in blended families, to do it in a way that's respectful of their partner, they're the child's mom or dad. So I just think the topic warrants the extra time. Did you have any like last note that you wanted to leave us with um, before we sign off?
I would just say that I agree with you, and I could really just talk for hours on this topic. So let's get some more guests to bring us other co-parenting questions, and we'll keep answering them and helping people with this very challenging but rewarding and important role of co-parenting.
Sounds awesome. I couldn't have said it better myself. Sarah, thank you. Dr. D, as always, I appreciate you taking the time, and hopefully we can keep solving the parenting puzzle.
Let's do it together. Thank you, Sarah.